I think the best investing is always opportunistic. There's probably people here who've already figured out something amazing that I've never thought of before that's going to be absolutely huge. But I think there are certain themes right now that are the main themes that we're excited about. The biggest theme that we've been focused on for the last decade is what I'd call the kind of smart enterprise wave. And so the basic idea in Silicon Valley is that at any given time, there's certain things that are possible, and you're trying to figure out, like, based on what's possible, what's going to happen, and how you're going to have a really big impact. And there's been a lot that's become possible in the last 10 years with the cloud and with big data and with using data to run big industries that needs to kind of roll out to fix the economy. So the way we look at it is, we were talking about this earlier, basically around the 1970s, 1980s, a lot of the very first software got built that runs most major industries. So even today, if you go into almost any government organization, any bank, any logistics company, any hospital, there's stuff there that's probably running from the 1970s or 80s that's kind of processing their inventory, processing their payroll, processing all sorts of basic processes and keeping track of stuff. And the reason it's there is it's worked really well for 50 years. But the problem is nowadays, as you all know, there's 1,000 times as much data. And in your job running these industries is to use data to make better choices. And so the thing you start to learn about big industries pretty quickly, the more time you spend with them, is it's like they're really broken compared to what they could be if they were using their data better. So in logistics, for example, there's millions, I don't know the stats for Canada, but around America, there's literally like millions of miles of like trucks driving in parallel that are both less than half full, where they could, where the similar place left from similar destination. It's obviously just that they didn't know how to coordinate, because it's a very hard data coordination problem. They may even be competitors, but even though they're competitors, if they had coordinated and used one truck, that would have actually saved everyone money and been good for the environment. And that's just like it's a silly data problem. But there's examples of this in every industry. Like when you're going to issue a mortgage, we actually could figure out, like one of our companies, Blend, it's like the costs are actually like a fourth of what they were before, because you can bring all the data automatically together for the process of how you help the bank issue the mortgage and figure it all out. But there's literally probably about 200 industries right now where there's specific vertical platforms where there's problems around kind of using data to make that part of the industry work better. And so unlike the consumer wave, where there's only really kind of 20 or so really big consumer companies that came out of those 20 years, those are the really impactful ones. We think there's more like 200 companies coming out of this kind of smart enterprise wave to really fix things specifically in different industries. I was just at Rubikloud earlier today in Toronto, which really amazing team. I'm very bullish on. A lot of people from Waterloo there, and doing something similar for back end of retail for the same things. How do you use all this data to run a retail store better? How can you be more like Amazon and to learn from what they're doing? And there's all these challenges there. So that's one area that we're really excited about. It needs a lot of really great engineers. Probably still see a lot more companies being built there in the next few years. The other one I'd say is even more recent. So again, I think that the hardest question is like, what's possible now that wasn't even possible 3 years ago? And that's okay. Well, what is going on in the world that's new, just really, really recently? And our best answer to that we've been spending a lot of time on in the last few years, is that a lot of areas of biological science have become information problems. And so obviously you guys have probably heard about CRISPR. Who knows what CRISPR is? I'm curious. Okay, so about a third of you or so. So as an example, CRISPR was a really big breakthrough. A friend of ours, Jennifer Doudna, is a scientist at Berkeley, and she was collaborating with Feng Zhang at the Broad Institute at MIT, and they were studying basically this new system that emerged from bacteria. So it turns out that bacteria and viruses have been at war for like 3 or 4 billion years. For most of evolution, that's the only thing that's been around is bacteria and bacteriophages or viruses, and they're constantly trying to kill each other, and they're constantly evolving new ways of killing each other and new ways of stopping that from happening. And it turns out that one of the most important weapons bacteria developed is this part of their immune system that if a virus causes them trouble, they take something and they snip a piece of the virus's DNA, they put it in their own DNA, along with some messages next to it so they know what it is. And then when other viruses come in, they use that to create the RNA and to go search and look and say, oh, if it's the same one that causes me trouble, I know what it is, I know it's there, I know I can go after it and try to snip it or kill it or whatever. And so it turned out that in evolving this, they evolved like the most efficient way we've ever seen to very accurately write DNA. And so it turns out there's something called a Cas9 protein paired with an RNA, and it can very quickly search and find DNA and either cut it, insert it places, snip it, all sorts of different types of protein and things you could do there. And the reason this is really important is it's like a computer basically. It's basically automatically with trillions of DNA somewhere very quickly find scan and find the right one and do something to it. So it becomes this like all-purpose machine that works for plants and animals and everything. And so when you can really quickly and easily edit these things, then on top of that, as you guys know, the cost of reading DNA has just gone down dramatically to the point where it's very, very cheap now to, for example, we used to have 3,000 types of bacteria in our guts, and as your health changes, the bacteria that are present change. And now we have a company, I probably shouldn't say how much, but it's a very, very small amount of money where they can just measure exactly what all the bacteria are in your gut, exactly what's going on. And once you do that for 200,000 people, as they've done, they can say, oh, well, every time someone has Crohn's disease, it's like this pattern shows up. So like I say, this person has a 99% chance of Crohn's disease, or this person has a 99% chance of inflammatory bowel disease, or whatever else, right? So there's all this data available. So both with like the reading and the writing and experimentation and iterating and building things, it's all become a giant IT problem to map out. And it's not to say you don't need the scientists, you do. You need good biological scientists, but if they don't have really good engineers, then they're in big trouble. So there's a bunch of companies now growing fast in the microbiome, in iterative gene editing, experimentation, the infrastructure for gene editing, that are all growing very fast, and mainly in Silicon Valley where we are, because it's the combination of the scientists and the IT. So anyway, that's a very exciting area. I could talk to you about that one all day, but we can always answer more questions if people are interested. I guess the other thing I'd say is just talking a little bit about advice. I'm not sure exactly how much people here are interested in entrepreneurship. I assume you're somewhat interested in entrepreneurship if you're here. I think the most important thing I did at Stanford, we were talking about earlier, was just getting to know all the other people who I can work on projects with and who I thought were people I'd want to work with later on. So no matter what you're learning here, like learning who else you respect and then learning how to get them to work with you on things, that's probably like one of the most important things you could do if you want to build companies. Like I always say, I am a very lucky guy, but I think my best skill was I have lots of smart friends. I was good at convincing them to help me build things, and that's like absolutely critical if you want to kind of accomplish things and create things in the world. So don't forget when you're kind of working on your classes and solving your hard problems and going yourself to meet everyone. Like make sure you have a big advantage being here in school to figure out who else is really smart and who else you can kind of be able to bring in and ally with together. Because I think the best use of these universities is to meet your peers and to learn how to work with them. So I think that's a key thing. I guess the other thing I'd say, we kind of already mentioned, but if you want to get involved in startups, don't go work for Google. It's not going to teach you how to be at a startup. It's going to teach you how to be at Google or Microsoft or LinkedIn. If you want to be involved in a startup, be involved in a startup. It's a very, very different company if something's growing really fast versus something that's a standard big company. It feels a little bit messier. There's a great business book called In the Tornado, which was the follow-up to basically, there's a book called Crossing the Chasm, where it's like how a startup gets from like very beginning early adopters to start to grow. It's Crossing the Chasm is a famous term we use a lot in the Valley. And the next book the author wrote is called In the Tornado, and he kind of went over 10 different companies that had all grown at over 100% a year for almost 10 years, because that's what you have to do to build a big company. You grow at a high rate for a long time. And it's just very, very different being in a company that's in the tornado versus one that's already kind of a big dominant company. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make at these schools is they go and they work at a very large company and think that they're going to learn about startups. It's fine. You'll have a fine career. You're never going to starve. All of you are going to do great, especially if you know how to work at a big company. So it's really a choice what you're interested in. But if you are interested in building things, it's a huge mistake to go to a big company, is my view.